Hello, friends. This is Jody J. Sperling, host of Becoming a Household Name, and today is December 23rd. So this is going to be one of the last episodes of 2024, and it's going to be the last episode before your Christmas holiday. So I wanted to wish you a happy Christmas Eve and a Merry Christmas and a joyful Christmas week. Hopefully it's wonderful and you've got great things planned to be with family. If you are not going to be with family, or maybe you're going to be alone, I hope that you find something joyful for yourself anyway. I know this year's going to be very different for me. I don't have nuclear family to spend the holidays with anymore. The last couple of standing nuclear family members that I have their own traditions now where they go other places, and so I spend my time with the in-laws, and that has been an adjustment. Thanksgiving used to be my favorite holiday. I always enjoyed Christmas too, though, to spend with my grandmother and grandfather. They were largely responsible for raising me during some really challenging years, and they did so with pluck and love and loyalty. Any good things about me I attribute to the guidance and leadership of my Grandpa Dave and my Grandma Bernice. So I'm very thankful for them. With that in mind, guys, I'm going to talk to you about something that I've been learning recently and the ways that I'm applying it to my writing and especially to my marketing. And before you scrunch up your brow and wrinkle your nose at me, I want you to keep an open mind, because this episode may sound up front like a little bit of a weirdness or a stretch, but I think that there's some great value in here, even if you don't draw all of the same conclusions that I have. So with that said, today I'm going to be relating some of the lessons that I've learned about Bitcoin. That's right, cryptocurrency. I'm going to be talking about some of the lessons I've learned from Bitcoin, and I'm going to front load that by saying I will be investing a large portion of my reserve wealth into Bitcoin. I have become convinced by my research and by my learning that this is the best way to move forward. And in order to talk more about why I think it's a great path forward, I want to share some of the beliefs that I started to build up before I ever thought about investing in Bitcoin. Also, I guess this is a moment to say I don't see any reason to invest in other cryptocurrencies. It's specifically Bitcoin, and I'll try to do my best to explain why in a moment here. But I want to take you back to when I was first advertising for AMO, Author Marketing Mastery Through Optimization, the program by Steve. I haven't run an ad for AMO in a little while, but I will still have a link to the program in the show notes here. So if you're interested in exploring that, it's a great program. Helped me sell thousands of books, and it was a really exceptional experience for me. But it was during this time that I became aware of a version of NFT, which is a crypto or a blockchain, something that is digital. It's a digital asset. And I was interested in ebooks as NFTs. I started to hear that some people were minting maybe 500 or 1,000 or even 5,000 copies of an ebook through the blockchain, and readers could buy and read those books the same way that they could buy ebooks through Kindle, although you can't have an NFT on Kindle, and I'll get into the reasons why in a moment. But you can mint your ebooks as NFTs and you can sell them. And when you do, you can prove that you own a copy of the book. It cannot go away under any circumstances because there is specific hard-coded information that means that you can open that file with the proof of ownership no matter what happens, no matter what reading program opens or closes. So long as there's a way to read the file, you own it in perpetuity, and it doesn't even exist on your computer. It is a true asset as long as there is computers. And if there aren't computers, we have bigger problems. Just repeat that phrase to yourself throughout this entire conversation, because we are going under the assumption that as long as there are computers, everything I'm going to say is true. And if there aren't computers, then everything I'm saying is the least of your concern, because you're going to be in a zombie apocalypse or a nuclear war. So that's not even a piece of this conversation. And it is kind of the foundation of what I'm going to call the but what ifers. The but what ifers are some of the most annoying people in the world. I hope you're not one of them. If you are, that should be your primary focus of quitting. But what if? Don't ask that question anymore. Don't, but what if? Start instead to say, what can happen? What can I do? What could I do? What might I do? Those are the questions that you want to ask. If you start asking, but what if, then you're going to shoot down every good idea you ever have. And yeah, you might shoot down a few bad ideas, but the hit rate is going to be miserable and you're going to hate your life. Again, I'm setting up all these things that I'm just going to leave dangling for a moment. I found out about ebooks as an NFT. I liked them because it meant that someone could buy my book for the price that they decided on. And I'm just going to use the term dollars, but in order for it to be an NFT, you probably need some kind of crypto token behind it. That's outside the extent of this discussion. I'm not going to touch it, but an NFT exists. The book exists. It's provable. It's verifiable. You own a copy. What does that mean? Now, if you own that book and you read a few pages of it and you're like, you know what, this isn't for me, you can list it, say on Facebook Marketplace or eBay or anywhere that you can list used goods and say, hey, I bought this book for $3. I'll sell it to you for $2. You can get some of your money back. That's a kind of cool thing. That means that I can be more adventurous with my ebook purchases because I don't have to worry about necessarily being stuck with them. And I know somebody else might like the book. Outside the scope of this conversation, you have to build a name for yourself so that people are interested in it. But it's a verifiable asset. It's a product. It never degrades. It never loses value. It exists forever, and you can own it and you can sell it. By owning it, you have value. By selling it, you can take value back. You could theoretically buy a copy of a book, one of 500, and maybe it will appreciate in value as people covet the cover that's associated with it. Maybe you're an author and you change the cover of it every 500 copies and you mint a new NFT. And so every copy of the book has a specific value. And now those copies always exist. They always have an individual ISBN. They have their own digital coding. They are just like, in every way, a physical copy of a book. Because I'm sure that you've seen everything from the Bible to A Christmas Carol. That's Charles Dickens, and it's a very seasonable comp here. Everything has a specific time and place. You've seen 50 million iterations of the cover of A Christmas Carol over the years. And some of those books have great value because maybe they came limited in printing. Maybe they're the originals. Maybe they're a first printing. Whatever the story might be. You could even mint it so that it had your digital signature on it. Then so 10 copies of 500 have your digital signature on them. The rest of the 490 do not have your digital signature. You can increase the value. There's so much you can do. I'm just skimming the surface of why I became interested in the blockchain, in the idea of Web3, something that's verifiable. The other really cool thing, and I don't know that this will always exist, but it was something that was appealing to me, was that I was the creator of the thing. And so I got to have a small piece of the profit of every sale, every transaction on that book. So I put the first pricing in. When somebody bought it, I got my cut of the pie, which is just the same as a book. There's going to be a cost to the digital asset. It's pretty minimal, and I get to carry the rest of that money as income. Then, if somebody buys it for $3.99, and they decide to sell it for $2 as a used good on Facebook Marketplace, that token, the physical thing, well, it's not physical, the digital representation of a physical thing, boy, words are fleeing from me at the moment. The verifiable, provable thing, it actually knows that that copy was sold. And so I've set it up in the background that I'm going to take 10 cents off of that transaction. So I get 10 cents every time a copy of that book moves. And that's really cool. That is different than so many other things that we do. However, if you think about how banks transact, you move money from me to a house. Now the bank holds the note and they start taking interest on the house. I decide to sell that house. The bank is going to take money out of that house when it moves. Every time the house moves, the bank takes money. We become the bank when we have verifiable, provable assets like this. We become the bank. That is super cool. But did you know that the Luke in Time Mysteries now comes in a 4 audiobook omnibus? If you love gritty mysteries with a splash of dark humor and a twist of magical mayhem, you can dive into the Luke in Time Mysteries right now with all 4 audiobooks at a pay-what-you-want price. That's right, I'm offering the omnibus, and you get to pay whatever you want, whatever you think it's worth. An Audible credit is $14.95 a month. You can get 4 books and pay as little as $1 or as much as $5 million. Whatever you want, whatever you deem worth it. The cool thing is you get the 9 Lives of Marva de Longhai, the 8-Ball Magic of Susie Q, and the 24/7 of a Russian named Roskov immediately, as soon as you contribute to this. And why am I doing it this way? Because I need to fund the 6 Sorrows of Shohei Matsui through this omnibus campaign. When you contribute, you're helping to fund the 4th audiobook production, and you'll get all 3 audiobooks in the series right away. The 4th one will come just as soon as this campaign is funded. I'm not doing it on Kickstarter. We're doing it a little bit different, but you get 32 hours of incredible narration by XE Sands. And if you contribute $100 or more, she will read your name in the acknowledgments for the 6 Sorrows of Shohei Matsui. So if that's something that you're excited about being an exclusive member of this journey, click the link in the show notes or visit jodyjsperling.com and grab a copy of the omnibus today. It's a really great way to make more money. It's a really great way to have something, to own it, to prove that it is yours. So that is a very short but hopefully illuminating reason why I was interested in doing this. I never did do it because I still don't have enough of a name to make it worth it. And one of the downsides is you can actually tank the value of your asset if you mint too many of them. So say you do a print run of 500, but you've never sold 500 copies of any book that you published. If you're 100% committed to this, what might happen is that 10 to 20 to 30 copies of the 500 will sell. And those copies will then be listed, and there will be an infrastructure that'll be like, oh, you can get this book discounted over here. And so 470 copies of the book will never sell, while 30 perpetually swing around, and you make 10 cents off of every transaction for the rest of eternity because people buy and sell those same 30 copies. You need volume in order for this to work. You have to have sold all the copies in existence to make it worth minting. And so that became to me a headache I wasn't willing to pursue. There are other reasons why I didn't do it. There was no blockchain that I really trusted to pull it off the way that I wanted it to, and there wasn't the infrastructure. It's coming though. It is coming, and that's a really important thing. So my eye remains focused on that over there. And importantly for this conversation, it primed me to start to understand the value that was held in Bitcoin. I have a good friend. He's going to be a host on the show. I've talked about him quite a bit lately. We've done a lot of in-person shows together. His name is Christopher Tallon. His stage name, his pseudonym. He has a real name, but I won't ever tell it this publicly. Christopher Tallon asked on X. I posted something about Bitcoin. I was just trying to figure out, like, where do I actually buy it? How do I get it safely? What are the ways that I get into this world? And he asked the question, like, what actually is Bitcoin? And it's a good question. It's a great question. So I'm going to do the very best that I can to describe what it is. And I'm also going to put some links in the show notes if you want to do a little deeper dive. There's a guy named Robert Breedlove that I think is the most effective communicator, and there's a specific interview he has with Tom Bilyeu that it really was the moment where I was like, okay, I now have the information I need to be convinced this is true. So when Christopher asked, what is Bitcoin? My answer to him, and it was very summarized as a reply on X, so I think it'll be suitable for here. Bitcoin is music. Bitcoin is radio waves. Bitcoin is the thing that is the value. So the analogy is, if you own a radio and you turn the radio on, it picks up frequency, radio waves, and whatever radio station you're tuned into, you're going to hear music coming out of the radio at you. What if one day you turned the radio on and nothing came out of it? Does the radio have any value? Most likely not, unless it's a collector's item, but it's really valueless without the radio waves. If you open up the radio, have you been able to locate the radio waves? Can you find them? Do you know where they are? What are they? What are radio waves? To the degree that you can describe what a radio wave is, you can describe what Bitcoin is. And there's another cool layer on top of this, because there is actually a physical representation of what Bitcoin is. How is there a physical representation of what Bitcoin is, but there's not a physical representation of what radio is? Well, I guess maybe both are true, but with Bitcoin, it's actually kind of cool. It's called blockchain. They're a series of numbers and letters. I've never seen the blockchain before, but you can actually get a piece of paper out and start to write down the blockchain. You can write the blockchain down like coding of a computer, and that is a physical representation of it. You could write down the blockchain of your Bitcoin and theoretically pass it around on paper, and people could use that to steal your Bitcoin. I'm probably way out of my depth here, but it is true that you can make a physical representation, which means Bitcoin is speech. It's protected by the First Amendment. Check into that also. If you listen to Robert Breedlove, he'll be much more eloquent about describing it. But that's what Bitcoin is. So it is a thing. And mostly you're going to think of it as radio waves. You're never going to be able to see it, but it is the value. It is the value. The value of Bitcoin is the fact that it exists, that people trust it. Bitcoin is trusted because of this blockchain, because of the infrastructure. There are, at any given time, millions of computers on millions of servers around the world that are verifying the existence of the Bitcoin, of the blockchain. They're unhackable right now. I'm not going to go into all the what ifs because I'm not a but what ifer. There are some what ifs that people ask. Some of them make sense to me. Some of them seem like people giving themselves excuses not to think deeply. Bitcoin is a thing. Let's stop there and let me make some claims that you should research for yourself, but they are the claims which have become the foundation of why I'm going to be buying a whole bunch of Bitcoin really soon. The foundation is that Bitcoin is not a fiat currency. It's provable. It is limited. There will only ever be 21 million Bitcoins in circulation. It's fractionable, but it is not increasable. So think of it like an apple. Bitcoin is an apple. If I have 21 apples, that will represent one Bitcoin. If I have 21 million apples, that will represent the whole of all the apples that will ever be. You can't make more of this Bitcoin. You can make more of apples, but with Bitcoin, 21 million is all there ever is. Right now, you can fractionalize it quite down to a single Satoshi. I don't remember the mathematical ratio of that, but let me ask you the question. If I have an apple, let's go back to saying that one apple represents the entirety of Bitcoin. I can cut the apple in half. Did I make more apple? I can cut the halves in half. Did I make more apple? Is there more apple to go around? No. The apple itself is all there will ever be. You can cut it as many times as you want, and in cutting it, you will never increase the amount of apple. But suppose you're Joe Blow, and one Bitcoin today is worth $93,000. Most likely, you could live on one Bitcoin for 2 years. If you are wise with your money and you are industrious, you could maybe live on one Bitcoin for 3 or 4 years, 5, 6, 7. Gosh, I don't know how good you are with money and moving money, but if you had that asset, it's enough for you for quite some time. So maybe you're the kind of person who's like, hey, I could cut this Bitcoin into 5 pieces and distribute it among 4 other people, and then we could all live for 1 year if we're industrious with our money. That Bitcoin is still only $93,000. It's now split between 5 people. With 21 million Bitcoins in circulation, you have a whole lot of people who can live off of the asset itself, but it never grows. So it's uninflatable. You can't inflate Bitcoin by pumping more of them into the system. Unfortunately, the US dollar is a fiat currency. The government tells you what it's worth, and it's fully reputational. So in my opinion, Bitcoin is actually safer than a dollar. And it's not just my opinion, it's the opinion of the people who have fallen for Bitcoin, that it's safer because it's not based on an opinion, it's based on math, it's based on velocity, it's based on foundation, security. No government can own Bitcoin. Nobody knows the creator of Bitcoin. That's actually a really helpful thing. But anyways, I'm talking a lot about that, and I want to now shift over to how these things have helped me to think differently about marketing, to think differently about publishing, maybe even to think differently about writing itself. And that's what I want to share with you right now. So when I was listening to Robert Breedlove talk with Michael Saylor about Bitcoin and the really like studious aspects of it, the academic elements of Bitcoin, Saylor brought up, I don't know who said the quote. I believe that it was the Mongols, and I'm not thinking of the guy's name right now, but it's like the greatest killer of all time. He was able to conquer China, and he said exactly how he was going to do it. He said, if there's a way for me to send a donkey loaded up with gold up to a gatekeeper, I can conquer the world. And what that means, see, I've probably perverted the quote just a little bit, but I took the essence away, and I hope you will as well. It means if you are dealing with a gatekeeper, there is always the chance that there can be perversion, there can be manipulation, and there can be destruction at a large level. So this represents the traditional publishing industry. You've got the big five, and there are all kinds of gatekeepers protecting the big five. And we've spent our whole life believing that that actually validates the system, when in fact it is the thing that corrupts the system. If you've ever felt like you wrote a great book and can't get the time of day, there's probably at least a reasonable chance that you have not been given a fair chance. That's because you've got agents who are working their asses off to try to get their payday. And so they're not going to look at every book based on its merit. They're going to look on the book based on the industry that they are seeing right now, and they are going to pick up the books that are going to make them money today. So there's no length of thought process here. There's no one saying, hey, you know what? This book is great, and I don't know of anything else that's in the market that's quite like it. And so I bet you it could take hold with a crowd that's hungry for this kind of thing. No, they're like, oh, vampire book. Yay, vampires are super popular right now. Let's get vampires. But imagine that you wrote this book that is not the vampire book. It's the really good book, but there's nothing like it out there. Imagine that you had $100,000, and imagine that you were just marginally good at starting a conversation that didn't sound really disgusting, and you reached out to an agent and you said, hey, I have $100,000 that I want to invest in this book, and I need somebody to represent me. Do you think you could find a literary agent? If your answer is no, then you're just not marginally good at convincing people of things, because for $100,000, a literary agent is going to represent you. Now, suppose that you put a stipulation inside of the contract you're going to sign with a literary agent that they need to use $50,000 of those dollars to ensure that a publisher picks up the book. Do you think that they're going to be able to find an editor for a publisher who's going to put enough leverage on this book to get it published? Maybe $100,000 isn't enough money. Maybe it has to be $1 million. But if you can carry the concept forward and understand, we're talking about a donkey loaded with a sack full of gold here. I don't know what the exact number is, but I guarantee if you have enough money, someone's bribable. You can get yourself published. And you might be like, well, yeah, but I don't want to lose $1 million to publish a book that's not going to sell. That's a different conversation. The real conversation is there's somebody out there who doesn't mind losing $1 million. There's somebody out there right now who's okay with spending $1 million to get their voice heard. And that corrupts the entire system. Just the fact that that exists corrupts the system. So, are there other options? Well, as a matter of fact, there are other options. It's called self-publishing, or some people like to call it indie publishing, though I find that confusing because indie publishing would be any press that's not one of the big five. Those are independent, gate-kept publishers. So let's just say self-publishing. I find myself sometimes using the term indie publisher because I'm afraid that I sound like a loser when I say that I'm self-published. Isn't that funny? Isn't that funny that chances are better than average that you are either indie published in the true sense or self-published, and yet if you've been listening this far in, you've probably had some negative thoughts about Bitcoin for the same reason, that it's just this random thing that some invisible person invented. There's no way to prove it has worth because no government has backed it, no gatekeepers behind it. It's just somebody's just going to pull the rug out, and like the computers are going to disappear. The but what ifers. You're a but what ifer about Bitcoin, and yet you're self-published. It's interesting to me. To be self-published is to say that there is no gatekeeper. Now, I just had this thought right now. And so I'm going to share it in the moment and see where it goes. There is a possibility that Bob could come to me with $1 million and say, hey, you're such a damn good marketer, Jody, that I'd like you to publish this manuscript that I wrote. And your name's going to be on it, and we're going to pretend it's your book, but it's really me, and I want you to give me a share of the money. So I'm going to upload the manuscript to you, and then we're going to sign a contract where I get 50% of all the royalties of the book that you sell. That's a possibility, I suppose. Yet, even there, I'm not technically a gatekeeper. I am a person who's going to benefit from a contract. I'm going to become a pseudonym for somebody else. And maybe that's actually awesome. Maybe that's amazing because I get value out of it because I am going to be the one who decides if the book is quality enough to put my name on it. It's my personal name. I'm not the gate. I am the thing. I'm the thing. I'm the brand. Do I want to associate my brand with that $1 million book? Well, maybe. Mike Tyson felt like it was totally cool to be a loser for $70 million or how much ever it is that he took to lose to Jake Paul. So it's your decision, but you're the gatekeeper of your life in this case. No, let me step back. You're not the gatekeeper. You are the sovereign of your reputation. You are the king. You are the royalty. You're the emperor. You are the thing. With your yes, it happens. That's different than a gatekeeper because a gatekeeper is a chink in a larger hole. The gatekeeper is the Great Wall of China. There's a gate in the Great Wall of China where, people can come through, and it's opened for approved people, but it's also open for people who are bribed. And an entire army can slip through with the right bribe. One person gets rich, 10 million die. That's again, what a gatekeeper is. So when one person can bribe the system to publish their book, how many of us suffer because we don't get a fair shot at publishing our books? I don't like gatekeepers. I like self-publishing. I think self-publishing is most likely where all of publishing will be to a large degree in the future. Now, there are some caveats here. And this came from the thought I had just a moment ago. One of the caveats is in order to be good at self-publishing, you have to be really, really good at the business of publishing. You have to be good at building a following. You have to be good at delivering multiple kinds of value, not just a really great book, but to be an interesting person, to get attention, to divert the stream of attention your way. So you can't just be the best writer out there. If you're the best writer out there, but you're shitty at getting people to like you or notice you or see you or act on your message, then you probably need somebody else to do it for you. You don't necessarily have to have a gatekeeper, but you have to do something to shore up your deficiencies. And that's okay. You can still self-publish. In fact, that's the next thing I want to talk a little bit about. And it's good enough to just go there right now. The reason Bitcoin is what it is among all of the other cryptocurrencies is because it was created with the most attention to all of the reasons that money is valuable. And I've mentioned a lot of them, so I'm not going to go over all of them, but Bitcoin is uninflatable. There are only 21 million of them ever. They haven't all been mined yet, but they will only ever be 21 million of them. That is a massive piece of value, is that there's going to be scarcity for them. There already is scarcity for them. There are not enough Bitcoins to satisfy the desire for Bitcoins. They're being mined as we speak, as people buy up more of them. There will be a point when all 21 million are owned, and they may be fractionalized so that people can distribute the store of wealth better, but they're scarce. So the way that Michael Saylor and Robert Breedlove talk about this idea of scarcity is air. Everybody needs air, but nobody is going to pay for air because it's naturally abundant. I can take a breath, I can exhale. I can take a breath, I can exhale. And I can do that over and over and over, and there's never a limit on it. until I go under the water. And that's why the only way you can sell air is by selling it to scuba divers or space astronauts. You get the point. So air has no value. It's not a good store of value because there is so much cost in bottling air. Water is a fairly decent asset. Water is a pretty darn good asset because you can't live for very long without water, and there are places where it's very scarce. So water is a pretty good store of value. The only problem is that where it's abundant, it's so abundant that nobody wants to pay much for it, and it's very movable. It just so happens that the world itself moves water around for us. And if you happen to live in a place like Denver or maybe Phoenix, we have the infrastructure to move water to those places in such abundance that people can live in godforsaken deserts that nobody has any business living in. We can enjoy the sun and sunny days 365 days a year because somebody can just flow water right in. So water doesn't have ultimately the kind of value that something more scarce could have. You can always move to a place where there's more water. It has to have movability to be a good currency. It has to have a way that it can move from place to place. That is a very important piece of it. And that's why gold was kind of tricky. Gold is tricky, and gold led to a fiat currency because nobody wanted to move 200 bars of gold to buy a house. And so they printed up a paper piece of money that represented that gold, which then lived in a bank vault. And suddenly people who maybe were not the most, let's say, scrupulous, would issue more notes than they actually had gold. And the only way that you could prove that that was backed by gold was to look at the vault and count the money that was based on that. Bitcoin, you can really easily, very quickly check the code around the Bitcoin. You can check the blockchain and say, oh yeah, that's not on the blockchain. That's not real Bitcoin. You can call it Bitcoin, but it's not Bitcoin unless it's verifiable by the blockchain. That value of being able to verify that it's real, that was part of gold as well. You know, hand somebody a block of gold and they're going to drop it from 5 feet up, and they know how it's supposed to sound because they know what gold sounds like when it falls 5 feet and lands on the ground. They might bite the coin and see if it's gold-coated lead, those kind of things. We know how to verify that gold is gold. You can melt it down. You can figure out what carat gold it is. All of those things, verifiably valuable. That is how you create a sense of value. So there's so many other ways that it's valuable, but that's what you get with independent publishing, is the need to create something that has all of the value that it needs to have in order to be desirable by lots of people. It's desirable when it's written with a good system of grammar and style. There was a time in my life when I believed that we needed to follow Strunk and White's rules on style and grammar. I've somewhat backed away from that belief in recent times because I started to realize that it wasn't about proper grammar so much as it was about a set of rules that you followed for yourself. It's kind of the same as self-publishing. I cannot do this at this time in my life, but someone could write a book in Ebonics. And if they followed the rules of Ebonics, the book would feel very, very real to somebody who is familiar with Ebonics, and it would have value in that. So it would have bad grammar, it would have bad style according to Strunk and White, but it would have great value to somebody who grew up speaking and communicating in Ebonics. The same, I guess, could be said for more aged languages. Like, I can write a book in French and it's of no value to you, but if you speak French, then it is of reasonable value. And so I think it's about following rules. Nonetheless, the value of the book is in following rules. So it means that you understand if you're going to misspell the word the, T-H-U-H, that could be a sort of a phonetical spelling of the, T-H-U-H, the. I'll say it one more time. No, I'm kidding. You could do that. But if half of the instances in your book of the were T-H-E and half were T-H-U-H, and there was no rhyme or reason, then readers would hang up on that. You're already going to be facing an uphill battle if you choose to make a syntactical, stylistic change, but you can do it, and there's value as long as you have rules that you're following. The reason I say this is because part of the value of books is a set of rules, the way that people are going to read the book, and it's apparent and evident what is happening. A book that defies the set of rules and just kind of goes by whims will not be widely adopted. You still probably will find some readers who like it. I know that there are some books out there that I have read that have abhorrent grammar and style, and they still have thousands of reviews on Amazon. So there's something for everybody, and that's worth noting. Nevertheless, they could do far better if they had editing. Now, editing is the most important thing I can think of for a book. I'm just about to post a reel on Instagram about this, and I find the algorithm on Instagram has discovered that I really like watching people clean carpets. Yeah, I know, it's crazy. I love watching people clean carpets because the before and after is so stunning. I didn't understand what was really working inside of me, though, and it's the fact that I have become so fully convinced in the power of revision and of editing that when I see those reels, the metaphor inside my head is telling me the story that I want to hear. And for all of you who get to see the reel, I hope that it will impact you the way that it impacts me. But to describe it, since I can't show it to you, somebody will lay out this, it's just, you can tell it's a piece of fabric, but like in a geometric shape, maybe a square or a rectangle, but it's like so filthy. It's just as if somebody poured buckets of spent motor oil all over it. You can't see anything. It's just a black, nasty, squelchy mess. And then the person pours some water all over it with maybe a cleaning solution and gets a squeegee out and squeegees off a layer, and you just see the filth come off the rug. And after the very first time, you might start to notice there's some textures on the rug. There's some geometric patterns starting to emerge, something. As they go, they're going to use like really high-powered car washing type tools and, buffer tools and all kinds of stuff. And I mean, these reels often can be like longer than 3 minutes. They're fairly involved. And I watch every one of them from beginning to end because I want to see that damn rug fully restored. It is unbelievable, the transformation. Some of those rugs look beautiful. I don't think every rug looks beautiful. Some of them I could think like if I had the money for it, I might be in the market for that rug, and others of them I'm like, that rug is hideous. Who in the world would be willing to pay that much money to restore a rug that was that like screwed up? But that's all part of this conversation, because even if you do everything in the world to create value in your book, if you hit every right note, you still have an audience that is limited by people who find value in the thing that you're doing. But with that said, the number of people who are willing to buy the first moment of the rug, like go ahead and list that rug as it was laid out, the one that's covered in motor oil and looks nasty and squelchy and gross. Who's going to buy that? I think roughly nobody is going to buy that. The only guys who are going to buy that are the people who are making the reels of the rug restoration. And those people might buy it. That would represent the percentage of people who are going to read a book that somebody published on Kindle with no editing and no help. Just bam, vomited out a first draft and was like, I'm putting it on Kindle. I'm going to be a bestseller. That's the number of people who are going to be interested in that first draft. The moment you bring in a beta reader, the moment you bring in 2 beta readers, 5 beta readers, the moment you bring in a developmental editor, the moment you bring in a copy editor, a line editor, the moment you bring in a proofreader, the moment that you do all of these things and go through all of these drafts, by the time you get to the 7th or 8th draft of a book, wow, you're really going to have something great. The highest potential of the story you can tell as seen through the collaborative eyes of many people. That is going to give your book the most value. Still might not catch. There's a whole lot else that goes into selling a book. But you know, if you've done that work, that the thing you have has true value. It's been verified by multiple people. Then you're going to go out and you're going to start selling that book to people. You're going to accumulate reviews on Amazon. You're going to gain steam, value. You're going to gain notoriety. You're going to gain a reputation. You're going to gain a brand. The book will get stronger and stronger and stronger. Think of Carrie by Stephen King. That book went through all of the things that I was talking about, 7 drafts, Tabitha King read it. All kinds of different editors read it. Nan Graham read it. Everybody read that book, and they had their hands in it, and they made this beautiful product. And today, a first edition of Stephen King, a true first edition of Stephen King in good, pristine condition is worth many, many thousands of dollars. Just one copy of that book. The other cool thing, though, is they're still printing new editions of Carrie, and those books are selling for $20 a piece. That is a truly valuable asset. If they flooded the market with copies of Carrie, there would eventually be less demand for it, and the value of all of those flooded copies would drop to relatively nothing until they remaindered them, until they took them out of circulation and burned them and got rid of them, disposed of them as trash. This happens all the time. So if you're not able to walk back and forth with the metaphors, that would be like a kind of coin that you can make limitless numbers of. It's going to depend on its demand and brand behind it. It's kind of like Dogecoin, and Dogecoin is a success story, but it's hard to find those, and there's a lot of risk involved. When you have something where you know that Carrie's only ever going to have 21 million copies, then that becomes something very, very interesting indeed. And I'm not saying that you should do that with your self-publishing, but I am actually going back to the idea of why Bitcoin has value. And there are not going to be perfect parallels between these things. So that's how I got interested in Bitcoin, and that is how I've been interested in thinking about my books, and that's how I'm interested in thinking about marketing, is being able to identify the specific value of my product so that it finds the right people, but being gosh darn certain, goddamn certain, that the product you have is worth the squeeze. It's worth owning. Because if you can sell 1 million copies of it, but nobody enjoys it, it's not going to have a long life. Marketing is really important. Marketing value is extremely important. And so those are some of the lessons that I have learned along the way, is that gatekeepers disparage and ruin the value. And going it alone and being sovereign requires a really high standard of value. If you're going to self-publish, you owe it to everyone to have a high standard for your work. No cutting corners, no saying you don't have enough money for something. If you don't have enough money, put the brakes on it and save up until you do have the money. Publish the book the right way. Put the money into it to do it the right way. It's totally fine to dicker, I guess, and try to get better rates on editing. It's totally fine to do whatever you're going to do to cut costs ethically and reasonably, but you have to do the work, and oftentimes you get what you pay for. So those are the things I've been thinking about, and hopefully I've given you just a massive download of reasons to think about self-publishing, to maybe reframe your thought process on self-publishing, on becoming a household name. Bitcoin is a household name because of its value and how many people see value in it. You can become that as well, and you can borrow from the principles of money and what it is in your self-publishing journey, or for that matter, your traditional publishing journey. There are more ways to get in the door than you might have thought about before. So go look for a great bribe and try to blackmail your way through those gates. It's very possible. It just takes determination, a different kind of determination for sure, and not something that I would recommend or do myself, but you could do that if you wanted. It's a possibility. The only thing you cannot do, should not do, and I hope that you never will do, is but what if. But what if is the death knell for every human being. When I heard about the carnivore diet, there were a lot of people around me who were like, but what if you die of cholesterol, high cholesterol? But what if all of those people who succeeded were like different than you, and you end up like hating meat? But what if? I just was like, hey, you know what? Nothing I've ever done has worked before, so I'm going to give this a try. And if I give it a try, and after 6 weeks I'm fatter and like greasier and nastier, then what have I lost? Like, not too much, because I was getting fatter anyways, doing what I was doing. But what if it doesn't help anybody? You know, like when I started sprinting, I could have been like, you know, I've always heard that max effort is like going to lead to injuries more likely, and you know, but what if I get injured? I won't be able to exercise at all. But what if? Being a but what ifer is so lame. And it's true that when I was sprinting, I did actually get injured. I dealt with shin splints for 6 months, and I haven't been sprinting now in almost a month. I know that when I get back on the track again and start sprinting, it's going to be right back to shin splint city, and I am terrified of it. In fact, I think I could probably start sprinting again now. My back is finally where I need it to be, probably. But I'm really scared to get out there, and I've kind of been dragging my feet, literally, metaphorically, both. But I'm not going to but what if. But what if I'm injured? But what if my back? But what if I lose all the progress? Hey, I still had that journey. I still had that experience, and it was a good one. Don't but what if. But what if all the computers in the world go away and Bitcoin doesn't exist? But what if I self-publish and the next day an agent that I queried comes back and says they want the book? But what if? Well, you pivot. You do something different. I like that last example because if you worked your butt off to get an agent, never had one, and the moment you decided to self-publish, an agent came by, you just learned something incredibly valuable, that your book is good. You just learned that your book is good. It took a little while to find the right person, but somebody reached out and said, I see the value. And what is more beautiful than that? Work hard, find your people, keep going. This is going to be an amazing journey for you. I want to wish you a Merry Christmas, and I want to implore you to get but what if out of your vocabulary. Don't be a but what iffer. Again, this is Jody J. Sperling. You're listening to Becoming a Household Name. If you like what I'm doing, you could always support me by buying my books. I would love that. There's a link in the show notes, and we'll talk to you next time.
Becoming a household name won't happen overnight, but with your help, it can happen for me or for anyone you know who's on this journey. If you liked what you heard today, would you consider sharing this podcast with someone you know would love it too? Word of mouth is the single biggest difference maker for a dreamer's outcome. Thanks again for listening, and we'll talk to you next time.